All right, welcome everyone to the Building Online Empires podcast. Today we are joined by Charles Joyner, Charles is actually just a few miles away from me here outside of Dallas, Texas. And so we're going to go through a little bit of his background and understand what he's been doing and a little bit about growth. He's taken a site basically from scratch to almost 60,000 page views a month in a period of a year. So it'll be interesting to hear a little bit about how he's done that and what he's learned on the way. So welcome, Charles.
Hello, Brian. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you again. So before we get into kind of what you've been working on and how you've had this success, tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started into online business.
Yeah, so my background is in software, and I've been doing it for years. And about 2018, my brother had bought a site, and he was telling me, Amazon affiliate marketing, Amazon affiliate, it's big, it's huge, right? And at the time I was working on a different project. I came from the video game background, then I made apps, and then I made application data, and I'm focused on that. And he bought this site. I think it was generating about $800 a month, and he paid about $27,000 for it. And so he got it, and he'd tell me about it, and then it just sat there. The site just sat. So, and sat. And pretty much it lost all its traffic and all its revenue. And he would tell me he needs to do something with it. And I would listen, but I wasn't really that interested. And then about January, February 2020, when COVID's hitting, my business is already starting to slow down a little bit, right? So, and I could foresee, oh no, this is some doom's coming here. I looked at it again and said, okay, you know what? Maybe we can do that. So I would say at that point, I began to look at it, and I didn't know anything about it. I'm familiar with WordPress I've just built some sites, and I could fumble around with it, but it looked doable and became kind of interesting. So sort of watching a lot of videos, reading a lot, and the Cunningham videos, the Fat Stacks, even your videos. I started looking at things and started going, actually, I think this is, I think we can do this. And so, and we also thought, if we could figure this out, and I'm a process person, if we could figure this out, we could make several sites. It didn't have to end here. Let's just figure it out and go. So I officially jumped in the pool in July of 2020. That's when I did my background and did all the research, lots of stuff. And July 2020, I jumped in. And at the time, the site was about 300 page views per week.
Oh, wow. So you came from a technology background. I think we have a lot of folks who start in technology and end up getting into online businesses, SEO, digital marketing. Do you think there was any aspects of your technology background that helped you with this, or was this basically starting from scratch?
It probably did. I mean, everything that we use online is the tools, a lot of services out there, and the understanding of how it works, just the understanding of it probably did. But I don't think you have to be high tech to do this. There's going to be a barrier to entry when you first start, because if you don't know anything about WordPress, you will need to know something about WordPress. And I use online tools like SEMrush and other things. Right. Anything you get into, you're going to have to go study it. You're going to have to learn what it does, right? But I think it did, but I don't think you have to have it.
Okay. Yeah, it's the technology background is helpful and it gets you the basics, but a lot of this is really new around SEO. So you took a site that kind of had crashed, and your job was to recover it, right? So, tell me how you started. You mentioned you watched lots of videos online, you read up, you kind of studied the industry, looked at case studies. So what did you do to start with the site? Because I think we've all have sites that we bought and had good intentions, and then life happened and we got really busy, and maybe
Uh,
we bought too many sites, and we've got a few on the back burner, and we're wondering, what should I do with these? So I just get rid of them? Should I shut them down? Can I sell them? Are they worth anything? Or should I try to recover them? And then if I do, where do I start to try to recover a site? Where did you?
okay, so kind of the very beginning. So the site, when I got it, was it had a ton of old plugins. WordPress was completely outdated. Hadn't been touched. You know what that looks like on your plugin screen, right? It was
Yep.
just a big red light. And I also ran it on GT metrics, and it got straight Fs. So what I first thing I did is I cleaned up the site, or I should say I cleaned it up and sped it up. And that was the very first thing. So I got rid of, all these plugins. You got to figure out which ones are what, and you know. But I think it went from maybe 30 plugins, and maybe it's a little exaggeration, but a lot of them, down to almost 8. So I got rid of a lot of plugins, and then I put it on a faster server. I use Green Geeks. I love Green Geeks. They're also very nerdy, and I'm nerdy, and their support is excellent. But all my sites now are on Green Geeks, absolutely fast. And then also later, I use Cloudflare, and I have a pro account with them. It's like $20 a month. And also, there was no Google Analytics, there was no Google search, there was no Google anything, right? Got all that taken care of. What's funny is I applied for Google Ads, and that's when I learned all my content was crap. At that point, I learned I had never read an article. I had the site, I'm doing all this stuff, whatever. I never picked up an article. And
Yeah.
Google AdSense basically sends me an email. I got to find it, but it's well written, but it says all of your content is junk, and we're not going to give you an account. And so that's where I was. I had a nice site, everything's running fine. My speed's going, everything's fine. And I read my first article, and it was like opening paragraph, blah 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 blah, and I was like, oh, this is awful, right? I had 183 of those articles like that.
So you had 183 articles on the site when you started.
Yes.
Okay. And Google AdSense rejected you. So basically, your first steps were to do kind of clean up of the site speed, remove plugin, kind of that kind of stuff. And then did you tackle content next, or did you do kind of technical SEO, run it through an audit and clean it up, or what did you do?
Yeah. So that's when I knew I had a big project in my hands. I know that I had a big problem, but when I knew the content was bad, but I needed to know more than just bad content and what Google told me. I need to know the insides, the guts of what the problems were. And so that's when I dug into. I found Stem, and I dug into that, and they have a ton of videos and classes. I wouldn't say I watched everything, but I watched the bulk of it. Right, really understood the software, and that's when I got my first SEO perspective. This the site was missing. It had no meta descriptions on every article. Plus, all my learned Yoast is all red faces or gray faces on everything. The site content was missing a lot of keywords. SEMrush has a nice little thing called, I think it's called a page audit, and you can kind of, it gives you ideas, whatever, and you can just see it just lit up with things, bunches of broken links, and many other things. SEMrush has kind of a health audit little circle there with a number on it, and I think it was around 50 something when I got it, and with some work and speed and whatever, I got up to the mid 90s. But at that point, I knew what the problem was, and I knew at that point it was going to be a pretty big project to fix.
Gotcha. Okay. So did you ever think at that point it would be better just to start from scratch? What led you to believe that, hey, I can take this site and get it to 60,000 page views?
Well, so from my research and stuff, I learned that an article that's already been there for a while, baked into, if you update it, you get the result back faster than a new content. So my initial thought was, I'm going to take about 50 or so articles, and I'm going to optimize them and get them in as fast as I can, and then see if what I'm doing is working. So basically, that's a whole process. I'm an Airtable person. So I'm a bit of a nerd like that. You can do stuff. You can do stuff in Google Sheets, but it'll never do what a project management system will
Yeah.
do. So I set up an Airtable, and the first thing I had to do was get all my URLs, and you get all your URLs from either your sitemap or use some plugins that'll do that, and the name of the article. And I kind of got all of my articles into an Airtable, and then since SEMrush will offer those on-page keywords that are missing, kind of ideas, I always put that in the Airtable, kind of suggestions. And as you know, Airtable has all these records, so each record I could assign different things to it. And I got all that prepped out. Eventually each record had the name of the site, the URL, what category it's in. Is it bicycles or whatever, tags, WordPress tags and categories and so forth. All these things listed for each 183 times. And then, what's nice about Airtable is once you get all this stuff set up, you can do things like change all your site from 2021 to 2022 by just adding in a field and then you got your guys go off and they'll go do it. And before you know it, everything's changed. Or you can bold all your internal links. You can just do all different kinds of things once you have it all set up.
Yeah. And I think what you mentioned there a minute ago about existing content that's been around for a while is easier to rank than a brand new article. Ahrefs had a study, I think it was a month ago or so, where something like 80% of the results that are on page one, of course, Ahrefs has this data points of billions and billions of pages and of information. So 80% of those that are on page one are content that's been around for 5 years or longer. So it's just a good point that it can be easier, even though it seems a little tough, to take an existing site with content and get it to rank through optimization and improvement than it can be to just start from scratch, right?
Totally.
Even if it's an expired domain, it's content that's been there. So
totally. And I watched it happen. It was real. And I didn't know at the time. I heard these things. A lot of stuff on the internet you hear. So I can verify that you take existing content, optimize it, you will get a pretty quick turnaround on getting it indexed and your analytics go up if you do a good job on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're basically doing a content audit using Airtable, put that content in there, and then you mentioned having some, like changing 21 to 22 or updating the articles like that, and having some of your guys do that. What help did you have? Tell us about your team. What kind of skills were you looking for? What did you do yourself, and what did you outsource?
So I ended up creating a team, two different types of team members. One I'd call a writer, and then one I'd call an editor. And obviously the writers write content, and the editors do really, I've morphed them into kind of the multiplayer person. As a writer, they would take, so in Airtable, make sure they would write in my existing keywords that I wanted in the article. And then what I would do is I'd create a group of tasks for each writer and assign them that article. I basically have 4 different types of articles. I have a how-to article, which is basically how to do something. Informational is more of a, specific on a subject like what are the different types of bicycle tires, informational, buyer's guides, and that's basically your best of, our picks, best 10, whatever it is. And then what I also call a single buyer's guide, just one piece. And as a writer, I would assign them group tasks, like to make sure that they have the H1, H2s, and H3s in there. I want, like for a buyer's guide, I want product descriptions. I want product pros and cons. And for pros and cons, I would just have them go over to Amazon and read the reviews, right? Great spot to find out what people are saying. And then also, oftentimes I put in specifications like weight, size, stuff like that in there. And then that was my writers, and I would set them up with tasks. And then the second part, the editors. So the writers, if you're familiar with content management systems, you have upcoming, I'm in progress, and I completed. Well, the editors would take that, put it back in progress, and then they would go through and do their set of tasks. And there's actually 14 tasks that an editor will touch on one of my articles, and that like they might split paragraphs up. I don't want more than 2 sentences for the mobile reviews on each paragraph. They'd add 2 to 3 internal links, 2 to 3 external links, add a video link, alt text. Any of the images that are all texted correctly. A lot of details in there. Properly WordPress categorized for my taxonomies and my article, my blogs and so forth, and tag. But there's a lot of things they do for each one, and so I would from writing, from taking that from writing to editors. It's a lot of processes, but I kind of built a machine, and I initially did every single one of those things myself because I wanted to understand the processes. I wanted to know how to optimize those processes. And on each task that you would assign somebody, I went in and I love Loom. I don't know if you've heard of Loom, but I love Loom. And I basically created, every time I have a task, I would create a Loom and do it. So if they ever have a question how to do it. And that kind of helped me onboard people. And eventually with Loom, I created a starter kit, like onboarding into my environment. My environment is Slack and Airtable, but they would go through kind of training in class, right? And they pass those things and so forth. So I created this machine, and I hadn't even started creating content yet. This was just optimizing. And by the end of that, I have it here. So July 2020 to December 27th, 2020, I went from 300 a week to 2,796, right? So that was the jump from optimizing. So when people say, does it work or not, we're discussing that. I can show you. It went whoop, right? Just like that.
What were you doing? Were you optimizing existing articles? Were you trashing any content? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so let me just tell you, the articles were trash. Okay. So maybe I'm using the wrong words, Brian. Let's just say I rewrote a bunch of articles, because every single product on Amazon was bad and outdated and gone. Yeah. The text was bad. I think there might have been some kind of creativity sitting there for the person writing it to start with, but there wasn't much left of that when we were done. And I typically like to have about 2,000 words for information on how to, and a single product, and I like about 4,000 words for a buyer's guide. And so that we did all that, and then I had all those keywords. I make sure they're plugged in and all that work. And I was pretty amazed. I mean, I basically had I can get into personnel, but I went through a lot of people to get my team. Initially I went through Upwork, and got them, and I went through a lot of people. If I would have everybody that would write for me, I would have them write 3 articles, because you can get away with 1, but it's hard to get away with 3.
Yeah.
And if they were good, I'd move them into my environment. So, and then we start there. So I had to pay for those articles. By the way, if someone writes junk, it never goes on my site, and it's a cost. But if you do that, you'll end up with a pretty good team.
So, when you look at it, you had 183 articles.
Yeah.
You optimized those. How much new content?
So when we had that success, immediately I'm on top of the world, right? So in January of 2020, I went full blown new content mode. I already had the team, right? I already had the processes, right? And SEMrush has a nice keyword tool that you can use in there to gain your stuff. So I had all the tools, and I had all the writers. So I went full on new content mode, and I basically had my Upwork team, and then I went to Text Broker, and I can tell you that with Text Broker, you got to pay to play for that. And what I mean by that is you kind of write these creative briefs, and you throw them up, and then people can take them, right? And you can, in that creative brief, you can choose, what skill level they are, and what I found with them is a lot of those guys that have 4+ ratings are awful, but you have to pay for the article regardless, right?
Yeah.
But what's nice is you can kind of favorite them and put them into a group. So over time, you can pay to have this group. And then after a while, I had about 7 or so writers over there that were good, right? And to me, a good writer is someone that puts a little energy into it. It's a little bit of maybe even some slang, a little bit of words in there, some feeling a little bit. And I had this group. So I had about 7 Upworks and about 7 text brokers on that. And by the way, kind of the way I would do it is I would buy my KGRs from, and they're great. And basically, I would take those KGRs. By the way, I trained all this. Those editors are my guys. Once I do it, I'd say, now you do it. But that's the way my mind works, is just train it out. So I would take those KGRs that you sent me, and then I would go through, and I have internal words that I use. I don't know if they're the right words, but I would create pillars of content and wreaths. And what that means to me is like bicycle tires is a pillar, right? And I would go through your KGRs, and I'd want all of the ones that go together that would link together, make a wreath. I wanted all that content to link to Lego is what I call it internally. So it all Legos together. So I'd handpick 50 to 100 out of those on that pillar. Right. And then I would make sure all of them are Legoed, because if at that time I had a 99% bounce rate, and when I came out of that, I was at 81%. So I'd almost had a 20% drop in bounce. But if you have, Google sees as an authority that if you have people clicking around your site, that you have something interesting. So it raises your authority. It does all these good things for you. Plus, if you have ads, it's another serving of ads and so forth. So I would take your KGRs, pillar them and wreath them, and then have them written. I also bought content from Human Proof Designs. By the way, great content. I think I bought 50 articles from you. You guys did a great job. So at that time, I was like mass content, text broker, writer, content producers, right? And I think I added about 700 articles between January 2020 to April 2020, somewhere like there, about 700 articles.
So you got up to what, about 1 million words of content, or?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Definitely. All right. And so KGR, this is the keyword golden ratio keyword research method. So you got the KGR packages from Human Proof Designs. And so did you just use KGR? Can you tell us any other hints around keyword research that you used?
Yeah, so I would use KGRs, and basically the process, this process of creating an article from a long tail keyword all the way through getting it published through editors and all that kind of stuff is, I call my mojo, right? So my mojo is get the KGR, and then SEMrush has a nice content creative tool that you can have in there. You'll pay a little more for it, but it will generate some keywords around that long tail that are relevant to that. And I would take those and then also some different lines in there. You can just kind of do it over and over again. And I would get a group of keywords that are really going to hit that. My strategy was to take an underserved content line from a KGR like you guys provide, and I wanted to go after the bigger ones, right? So I could just take a little bit of that. So yeah, I kind of joke internally, but I believe I could write I could go after the article could be pizza, right? Is great with pepperonis, but I could turn it into a dishwasher page, right? So by keywords and there's a little exaggeration there, but you can kind of manipulate the content to kind of get a bigger pull in there. So I would just take your KGRs, and then I'd run through some keyword tools in the SEMrush, and I'd grab those, and I'd take them over, and in my Airtable, I had my writers, and I wanted all these keywords written to that content.
Gotcha. Very cool. Yeah, that's a great story. So tell us, what's your plans going forward with the site? What are you working on next with it? And And kind of what are some lessons learned, some struggles that you had in building it up to what it is today?
Yeah, I'm still creating content, and there's monthly revenues from ads. I will tell you that some lessons I've learned on ads is, so basically Google. I eventually reapplied for Google AdSense and I got approved. And I would say that Google AdSense pays okay. Zoic pays about 30% more than Google AdSense. And then when I passed 50,000 views, page views, I went to Mediavine. And Mediavine pays about 20% more. Thing about Zoic is it will completely crash your page speed, right? It's just a horrible thing. And then, but Mediavine, but their support's good. I always had a 100% good experience with support. And Mediavine's is very fast, right? I don't have very little page speed. So what was interesting is along the way, I noticed that my ads revenue was increasing with traffic, right? So, but I noticed that the Amazon revenue was not. It's kind of flat, right? Remember, I had all these people writing content. I had all this stuff going on, right? And so I know it was kind of flat. So then I started digging into that, and I, as a nerd, you start digging around and looking for these things, and I set up a custom event in Google Analytics. I could see that I wanted to know the traffic from my website to Google, and I could see the traffic going over there. And then, as you know, if you go into Amazon reports, you can see the clicks, and those two didn't match. So I wasn't obviously getting credit for a lot of these things. So I sat down, again, using Airtable. I realized I had about 112,000 links on the site at that point. And I had two people, and I set up an Airtable, say, go click on every one of these and find out what's wrong with them, right? And that didn't last very long, because at some point it looks like mush, and nobody can do that. No human being can do that, right? At very limited time. So I basically, at that point, I wrote, as a nerd, I kind of wrote a little piece of software that went and looked at, and I found all these issues that I started having. And then, as a nerd, I wrote software to fix those things. So basically, in a very short time, I fixed them kind of all at one time. And I knew that if I could fix those links, all those Amazon links that are broken, I'm going to make more money right then, right? And immediately I saw my clicks on my Amazon report. I could show you the analytics. I actually track KPIs and all that, and I could see it immediately, just boom, just like that, straight up, right? And I went, there we go now. And then, of course, my Amazon revenue took off, and it worked so well, I actually turned it into a product. It's not out yet. It's called Link Money. If anybody wants to check it out, linkmoneyapp.com. But basically, it will automatically fix all these problems for you. And it's just amazing. But I guess my biggest lessons were taken out of this is, don't write crap content. Don't allow crap content. Google's getting smarter than ever, right? And a lot of these articles can be around forever. We call them evergreen, I believe is the word. And just take the time, do it right, and you'll pay benefits. I will tell you it's about $27,000 the site was bought for in 2018, lost all its money. And then I put about $12,000 into it starting in January, right? And took the site to almost $4,000 a month, right? So that investment is excellent, right? And so basically we would take all of that money and just put it right back into content, just like this. And the site right now, I believe, I have to check, I think it has 817 articles.
Gotcha.
And we're looking at making more.
Yeah.
We got to figure it out.
So that's a great income stream that's going to quickly pay back that 12K. And then from there, it's just going to be growth.
It's already paid back, Brian. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just keep putting it back in. Let's go to 2,000 articles, right? We were actually, what I'm just doing is I'm trying to pick pillars that I can create new content. Like, what are those pillars to choose? So we choose them. So you'll probably be hearing from me soon. Come get some more KGRs, and we'll do that. We'll do that process again. You know, probably going to add another 700 or 800 articles to it this year.
Excellent. Yeah, so David's going to want his site back, I think, huh?
Well, we have a business deal now, so yes, he's pretty convinced that now, right, that we know what we're doing, and the proof's in the pudding. As a nerd, and David's an excellent business guy, and so we track a lot of data because there's a lot of assumptions you can make on this kind of stuff, and we wanted to track every single increase, how we got it, what we did. I'm a documenter, so what those processes were, and then video those processes, create the onboarding, for our team members. So create a real machine. I mean, right now I can create. Most of my writers can write between 5 and 7 articles a week, right? And I've got about, let's just call it a solid 14, and I could span on that. So let's do the math, how fast you can create content.
Yeah, that's a lot of content.
It's a lot of content, and pretty reasonably priced too. I've got writers that are excellent that cost me $20 an article, right? And I'm talking about top of the line. And then I think my most expensive person is $100 an article, and I have them write some buyer's guides, big, long buyer's guides.
Yeah.
And that sounds like a lot, but that buyer's guide is going to make you some money right down the road. So, and I don't use them that often, but I'll sometimes come in and go, this is a specific thing, and I want a beauty piece, right? And this guy is just amazing, right? He'll write a beautiful piece, right? 4,500, 4,700 word article. And then I take that and, just kind of use them from time to time. But my range is usually around $20 to $30.
So are you using any tools like Phrase or Surfer, or you kind of got your own process for figuring out the length of the article and optimizing it?
So I dug into Phrase, and I bought their tool. I bought their AI tool with it as well. And I messed around with it because I wanted to be familiar with it. You had actually mentioned it a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I went and checked it out at that point. I bought a service, and I had it for about 6 months, and I was screwing around with it, and I like it. So I don't really care if they use Phrase or not. I don't mind. I know I know one for sure does. And there's some really cool things in Phrase that I've come up with that I like. I like the fact that it gives you kind of ideas and hints of content. Then you can throw those into your creative brief and gather that information and kind of rewrite it. I haven't liked the AI tool. Now, from someone who watches Star Trek, my idea of an AI tool is like, make me an article 2,000 length on butterflies, right? And I want this beautiful thing to come out with images and links and everything. It is not like that.
No.
But I think it's the future, and I think they're putting time into it to make it better, because I kind of saw it grow over time, going to get a little better. It was kind of stumbly at first, and now it's getting better. What I want is, from a writer, I don't mind them using those kind of tools, is I still want that personality in there.
Right.
Not just blah, right?
Yeah.
People don't read that. And by the way, I bumped all my font sizes up on my site to 20. I think they were 16, just because they're a little bit bigger. And if you track your analytics, almost everything's coming from a mobile phone. So I make sure that it's spaced out and big enough and looks nice first on a mobile phone, second on it.
Yeah. So when you get to the size site you have, 800 plus articles, you mentioned this Link Money app. That becomes a challenge, especially taking on a site that already has lots of content that you've got to update and change. Yeah, so Link Money is basically an app that's going to go through, and I don't want to reveal all the details because I know you're about to launch that, but basically it's going to help you manage all the links, update those links, and make sure all your Amazon links are perfect.
Yes, this was the biggest revenue hit, boom that I had, because remember the ad revenue was going up with traffic. It just goes up. And when I fixed my Amazon links, all of a sudden I got really hit. I don't want to say what site it is, but I have some of my articles sell really big, expensive things, right? And when those sell, there's a lot of commission to them, right? Not everything, but there's some. And so when I started realizing I'm actually selling those. So what Link Money does is it basically goes through and, let's say you have 1,000-page website. I don't know, 200, whatever, 1,000, whatever it is. And you're going to accumulate a lot of links. Well, what ends up happening is those links go bad. Those links go 404. You have, if you're like me, you have a lot of contractors working on your site. They forget to put the store code in there, or maybe even they just put the wrong link in there. It could just be a search link. Like maybe they were searching for pool equipment and they actually put the pool equipment link in there. Link Money will go through and it will first scan to show you all the store codes or missing store codes you have on your site, which is important because I always thought that I had store codes that weren't mine. I suspected it, and I think and I did. And so, how did that happen? Well, I had a lot of people on my site doing stuff. Well, why not throw one of their store codes in there, right? You get a little money. So it's a lot of peace of mind, but it'll tell you all of it, and then it'll basically change every single one of them out, right? It'll also do the AMZTOs. Some people have used that in the past. It'll convert all the AZMTOs to regular affiliate links, if that's what you want to do. It does a lot of things, but it'll tell you all the problems that you're having with that. So if you go through and do all of that with Link Money, first off, it'll do a lot of it for you. But there are some things you're going to need to do because a bot, my AI can't tell exactly what you meant by it, but it's not much. Also, I have a revert. Let's say you like, I sell the site to you, and then you put your store code in it, so it's sitting in your inventory. And then as you're going to sell it, and you sell it to a customer, you can immediately turn them all over to theirs, so it's not one big movement. But something happened, I don't want to. You can revert right back, and so they can put it right back the way it was for any reason. So it's a tool built by somebody who does this, and I'm completely anal, Brian, about this kind of stuff and details. This thing is exactly for us. It does nothing more and nothing less than fixing all your Amazon links.
Yeah, I'm anxious for you to get that release because we, at Human Bridge Designs, we buy multiple sites every month, sometimes with 200 or more articles. And yeah, we do spend hours cleaning up and fixing links. And your tool's a little different because it's not going to just tell you what's broken. It's going to actually go through your site and fix it. So looking forward to that. Well, very cool. Charles, appreciate your time today. Very cool story about your site. So, and with Link Money coming out, so we'll keep an eye on. Appreciate your time today, Charles.
Well, Brian, I'll take a moment here to shout out. Brian runs a great business, and I do business with him, and you should do business with him. Everything that they've ever done is quality, and I do appreciate people like you that actually pay attention, you care, right? And so if you need something for websites or KGRs or content, he'll even make your whole site for you if you want one, right? Go to Brian. He's really good. Human Bridge Designs. And I appreciate you too, Brian.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you. Take it easy.